When my mother's blood trickled down the stairs, my own grandfather smiled. "Now it's just the two of us," he said. That day marked the beginning of my personal hell, but also the start of my silent revenge. Good morning, my loves. What a joy to be able to talk with you today. My name is Irene Foster. I'm 73 years young, you hear? I was born in a small town called Pineville, deep in the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia, but today I live here in Riverdale, Oregon, my blessed little town by the Columbia River. This is where I found my peace after so much turmoil in life. You know what I love to do these days? Knitting colorful quilts while sipping my sweet iced tea. It's an old tradition around here, you know? I learned from the local ladies when I arrived, over 50 years ago now. My hands are calloused, my fingers aren't as nimble as they used to be, but I still make the prettiest quilts in town, if I do say so myself. I sell some at the Sunday craft fair, but most I give as gifts to my 3 grandkids and to people in need. I started quilting when I needed to rebuild my life. Each stitch was like tying up the loose ends of my broken heart. Each colorful thread represented a new beginning, a new day when I chose to move forward. It was my therapy, my livelihood, and my salvation. I'm sitting now on my wooden porch, watching the river flow below. The house is simple, but it has a view of the Columbia, and on clear days like today, you can see the eagles playing in the sky. I have my plants, my birds that come to eat from my hand, and the peace I sought for so long in life. Before I continue my story, I'd like to ask you something. If this video touches your heart, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next life stories. And you, my dears who are watching me now, tell me in the comments, which town are you watching from? And what time of day did you find this video? Early morning with coffee, after lunch, or already in the evening? I always read all the comments, and I'm so happy to know where you're from and when you take time out of your day to listen to this old grandmother's stories. Let me know, okay? Let's create a chain of kindness. Today, I'm going to tell you a story that I've kept silent for many years, a story about loss, pain, and a girl who had to find strength where there was none. It's not easy to talk about this, but I've learned that sharing our pain can also be a path to healing. And who knows, maybe my experience will help someone going through something similar. It was a long time ago, in a simple house by the creek, where I lived with my mother and where everything changed after my grandfather came to live with us. These are memories that still make my heart ache, but that today I can look at with the wisdom that only time gives us. I was born in a small cabin by the creek in Pineville, West Virginia. It was a simple house, all wood, with a floor that creaked when we walked, and walls that let the cool breeze pass through on hot nights. We had a small porch from which you could see the creek and the other small houses scattered along the bank. That's where I lived the first years of my life, among the smell of fresh-caught trout and the sound of blue jays passing in flocks at sunset. My mother, Delia Foster, was a strong woman, the kind who wouldn't bow her head to anyone. She worked as a midwife in the community, knew all the herbs and remedies from the mountains. Women came from far away to be attended by her. As a little girl, I already helped collecting the leaves and roots she needed, learning the secrets of the plants that heal. My mother had long black hair, always tied in a bun, and brown eyes that seemed to see into your soul. She was strict, but had a heart as big as the world. My father, Adam Turner, wasn't a bad man, but their marriage was never peaceful. I remember the arguments that echoed through the house at night when they thought I was asleep. He worked in the coal mines, was gone for months, and when he returned, the house turned into a battlefield. I can't say if he hit my mother because she never let me see such things, but her screams and crying at night told me things weren't good. When I was 4, on a rainy January afternoon, my father packed his few things in a bundle and said he was leaving. "I can't take this life anymore, Delia. You and your daughter will be better off without me." That was the last time I saw him. My mother cried for days, but then she rose up as she always did. "It's just the two of us now, Irene," she would say, while braiding my hair in the morning before school. Our life followed a simple but happy rhythm for a few years. In the morning, I went to the little town school where I learned to read and write with teacher Josephine, a patient lady who taught us under a big oak tree when it was too hot in the classroom. In the afternoon, I helped my mother with the herbs or played with the other children from the creek. I liked to jump in the creek water, hunt for small treasures on the bank after the flood, and listen to the stories from the elders about mountain spirits and other enchanted beings of the forest. My closest friends were Mary and Ruth, daughters of neighboring fishermen. We played with dolls made of corn husks, played tag between the cabins, and sometimes helped their parents clean fish in exchange for a piece of apple pie. It was a simple life, but I didn't know I was poor. I had everything a child needs: food on the table, a mother who loved me, and the freedom of the forest and creek. Things changed when I was 9. One stormy afternoon, there was a knock on our door. It was my grandfather Jeremiah, my mother's father. I barely knew him, had only seen him 2 or 3 times in my life. He was a tall man, with broad shoulders, with a look that gave me chills. He arrived wet from the rain, with a small bundle of clothes and a closed expression. "Delia, I need a place to stay," was what he said. My mother hesitated at the door, her body tense as if she wanted to close the entrance, but ended up giving way. "It's my father, Irene," she explained later, in a low voice. "We don't turn our backs on family, even when it's difficult." At first, my grandfather even helped around the house. He fixed loose boards, fished for our sustenance, brought firewood for the stove. But soon I began to notice that something wasn't right. He looked at my mother in a strange way, as if he was always angry with her. When he thought no one was looking, he would take her medicinal herbs and throw them away, saying later that the rats had eaten them. At night, I heard him muttering to himself, saying senseless things. My mother began to change. She became quieter, more worried. Sometimes I caught her crying hidden behind the house. "It's nothing, honey," she would say, quickly wiping away the tears. "I'm just tired." But I knew it was more than that. Something in our house had changed with my grandfather's arrival. People in the community began to comment. Old Teresa, the oldest prayer woman in the town, once held my mother's arm after a prayer and said, "Be careful with that man in your house, Delia. He has a heavy shadow." My mother just shook her head and pulled me to leave. My grandfather's outbursts began subtly. First, it was just grumbling and cursing when contradicted. Then, he started breaking things when he got nervous: a plate, a pot, a chair. My mother would send me to Mary's house when she noticed he was having those bad days, as she called them. "Your grandfather is not bad, Irene," she tried to explain to me. "He's sick in the head. It's not his fault." But I saw the fear in her eyes, the same fear that was beginning to grow inside me. One day, returning from school, I found my mother with a black eye. "I hit the corner of the door, honey," was her explanation. But that same night, I heard my grandfather shouting at her, "You're just like your mother, worthless. You think I don't know what you do when you go out there with your herbs?" In the following months, our house became a place of heavy silences and sudden shouts. I was beginning to understand that my grandfather was not just a sick man. There was something darker inside him, something that seemed to grow each day. And the worst part? This something was beginning to turn not only against my mother, but also towards me. When I turned 12, the situation at home was already unbearable. My grandfather Jeremiah seemed to have 2 people inside him. Sometimes he was calm, even brought me small gifts from the market, a colorful ribbon for my hair, a different fruit that I had never tasted. But it was as if a black cloud could descend upon him at any moment, without warning. I remember one specific day, the eve of my 12th birthday. My mother had prepared a cornbread cake with pecans, my favorite. She rarely sang, but that afternoon she was humming softly while stirring the dough in the large clay bowl. I was sitting on the kitchen mat, peeling the pecans, happy with that rare moment of peace. "Mom, do you think there will be a 4th of July celebration this year?" I asked, dreaming of the dances and fireworks that took place in Pineville's Central Square. "God willing, honey. I already talked to Rosalie about making a nice dress for you to wear to the parade. That's when the door slammed hard. My grandfather entered the kitchen, red eyes, smelling of whiskey. His gaze went straight to the cake my mother was preparing. What's this waste, Delia? Spending the few cents we have on nonsense? It's the girl's birthday tomorrow, Dad. It's not a waste to celebrate my daughter's life. He gave a dry laugh, the kind that made my stomach freeze. Your daughter, another mouth to feed, just like you, good for nothing but giving trouble. My mother turned to me, her face tense but trying to smile. Irene, go to Mary's and get those blackberry leaves I asked for, okay? I knew what that meant. It was her way of sending me out when she felt my grandfather was about to explode. I left quickly, but I didn't go to Mary's house. I stayed under the window listening. Don't talk about my daughter like that, Dad. She's a good girl, studious. She's going to be somebody in life. Somebody in life? Here in this backwater? You live in a fantasy world, Delia, just like your mother, full of foolish dreams. Leave my mother out of this. You made her suffer enough in life. The noise was quick, like a slap. Then, silence. Next time you talk to me like that, it won't be just a slap. And that girl, it's time she learned what a woman's place is in this house. I ran away, with tears in my eyes, and stayed hidden by the creek for hours. When I returned, my mother had a red face on one side, but she had finished the cake. My grandfather had gone out. Everything's fine, honey, she lied, hugging me tight. We're going to celebrate your birthday tomorrow, even if it's just the two of us. That night, she came to my bed and sat beside me. Her voice was different, lower and more urgent. Irene, I need you to promise me something. If someday I'm not here, you need to be strong. And you need to leave this house, understand? Go find old Teresa. She'll know what to do. Why are you saying this, Mom? Are you going to leave me? My heart was racing. No, my love, never by my choice. But sometimes life takes turns we don't expect. She stroked my hair and kissed my forehead. Just promise me you'll remember what I said. I promise, Mom. But I didn't really understand what she meant. Not that night. In the following months, my mother began hiding things around the house. Once, I caught her burying a small cloth bag under the loose floorboard. What's that, Mom? She was startled to see me, but then smiled sadly. It's our secret, honey. Here's a little money I've saved, and the address of my cousin Lucy in Riverdale, Oregon, if you ever need it. But it's our secret, okay? Your grandfather can't even dream about this. Another time, she taught me how to prepare a specific tea. This is to calm agitated people, she explained, showing the exact amount of leaves. If someone is very nervous, very out of control, this tea helps bring peace. I was beginning to understand that my mother was preparing for something, but I was too young to fully comprehend. The day that changed everything started like any other. It was March, a time of heavy rains. The creek water was high, almost reaching the floor of our cabin. I returned from school earlier because Teacher Josephine was sick. When I approached the house, I heard the shouting. You think I don't know? You think I'm a fool? You've been talking about me to that old prayer woman, haven't you? Dad, please calm down. Don't tell me to calm down. I saw you two whispering after church. You're plotting against me, aren't you? Wanting to put me back in that place? I stopped at the door, not daring to enter. Through the crack, I saw my mother cornered against the kitchen wall. My grandfather had his back to me, his fists clenched. Nobody wants to put you away, Dad. I just want you to seek help. This hatred is consuming you, and it's scaring Irene. That girl, you're filling her head against me, just like your mother did with you. No, Dad, nobody is against you. We just want... I couldn't hear the rest. My grandfather advanced on her, grabbing her arms. My mother tried to break free, and in the push she gave, he staggered backward. That's when she ran toward the door, saw me, and her face transformed into pure terror. Run, Irene, run! I was paralyzed. My grandfather recovered quickly and went after her. My mother tried to dodge, but he grabbed her by the hair. In the struggle that followed, she lost her balance near the internal staircase that led to the basement of the house. It all happened very quickly. A push, a scream, and the terrible sound of a body falling down the wooden steps. Then, the most frightening silence I've ever heard. "Mom!" I screamed, finally coming out of my state of shock. I ran to the stairs, but my grandfather held me by the arm with such force that I felt my bones crack. "Don't even think about it, girl." He threw me against the wall and went down the stairs. I stayed there, trembling, listening to his heavy footsteps. When he returned, his face was as white as paper. She hit her head. She's not moving anymore." I tried to run to the stairs again, but he stopped me. "It's too late. We have to call for help. Old Teresa, the healer, someone." He grabbed my shoulders, his fingers digging into my skin. "Listen well, girl. It was an accident. She slipped and fell. If you say anything different, nobody will believe you. They'll say you're lying, that you're crazy. Understand?" I was crying so hard I could barely breathe. He shook me violently. "Understand?" I nodded, terrified. That same night, under the heavy rain, I saw my grandfather digging a hole in the backyard, behind the house. My mother's body, wrapped in an old mat, was placed in the improvised grave. I watched everything hidden, feeling that a part of me was being buried with her. "If anyone asks," he told me later, "your mother went to visit relatives in Charleston. When they ask too much, we'll say she decided to stay there." And so began my true nightmare. My mother, my protector, my light, was gone forever, and I was alone with the man who took her from me. The days after my mother's death dragged on like endless shadows. A week after it happened, Teacher Josephine asked why my mother hadn't come to pick me up from school as usual. "She went to visit family in Charleston," I replied mechanically, as my grandfather had instructed me. The words came out of my mouth, but my eyes couldn't face her. At home, my grandfather had changed. The violent and explosive man gave way to someone more calculating, colder. His voice rarely altered now, but each word he said was like a sharp blade. He began to control every aspect of my existence. "Where do you think you're going in that outfit?" he would ask when I was getting ready for school. "Want to look like a common woman? Put on something that covers those legs properly." At first, some people from the community came to ask about my mother. Old Teresa even insisted, looking suspiciously at my grandfather. Strange that Delia would leave like that, without saying goodbye to anyone, without taking her things, without taking the girl. "Delia was always unpredictable," my grandfather replied, his heavy arm around my shoulders, squeezing as a silent warning. "Said she needed time alone. She'll send for the girl when she's settled." Old Teresa looked into my eyes, as if searching for the truth there. "Is that right, child? Your mother left and left you behind?" I felt the squeeze on my shoulder increase. "Yes, Mrs. Teresa. She said she'll be back soon." The old prayer woman didn't seem convinced, but she didn't insist either. Before leaving, she held my hands between her wrinkled ones and murmured, "If you need anything, my door is always open to you." But my grandfather made sure I could never seek help. I stopped going to school regularly. "You don't need schooling to wash clothes and cook," he would say. "Your mother filled your head with those book nonsenses. A woman has to learn to serve." I had to take on all the housework. I would wake up before sunrise to light the wood stove, prepare coffee, wash clothes in the creek. My hands, once small and soft, soon became rough and cracked. At night, I would fall exhausted into my bed, silently crying for my mother. The worst were the words. My grandfather had a cruel talent for diminishing, for making me feel like nothing. "Look at you. You can't even make a proper porridge. Your mother was worthless, and you turned out just like her. You think anyone's going to want an ignorant brat like you? Be grateful I give you a roof and food. A woman is only good for two things in this life, obeying and serving, and you don't do either one right." Each day I felt a part of me dying. The cheerful Irene, who played in the creek, who dreamed of being a teacher like Josephine, who knew the medicinal plants. That girl was disappearing, replaced by a frightened shadow living in a constant state of alert. Sometimes, when I passed near the place where I knew my mother was buried, I felt such a tightness in my chest that I had to hold myself not to collapse right there. I began to whisper to her on nights when my grandfather went out to drink. "Mom, I know you're listening to me. I haven't forgotten what you asked me. I'll be strong. I'll find a way out of here." But the months passed, and I remained trapped in that house of nightmares. The silence of the community hurt me almost as much as my grandfather's words. Everyone seemed to have accepted the story of my mother's trip. Nobody questioned the bruises on my arms when I went to the market, or the fact that I almost never appeared anymore at church or community celebrations. One afternoon, almost a year after my mother's death, I was washing clothes in the creek when Mary appeared. We hadn't seen each other in months. "Irene, is that really you? I almost didn't recognize you." I tried to smile, but my face seemed to have forgotten how to do it. "Hi, Mary." She approached, hesitantly. "What happened to you? You're so thin, so different." "I'm fine," I replied automatically. "Just busy taking care of the house." "And your mother? Still hasn't returned from Charleston?" I shook my head, unable to repeat the lie one more time. "Irene, something's wrong, isn't it? You can tell me. We've been friends since we were little." For a moment, I almost gave in, almost let the truth escape. But then, I saw my grandfather's shadow approaching along the trail. "I have to go," I murmured, quickly gathering the wet clothes. Mary held my arm. "Wait, those on your neck. Are those finger marks?" I pulled my hair to cover the marks left by my grandfather's hand the night before, when I had dropped a plate during dinner. "It's nothing. I have to go." "Irene," she called as I walked away. "If you need help, my family." But I was already far away, carrying the weight of the wet clothes and my terrible secret. That night, my grandfather returned home drunk. This had become more frequent in recent months. He threw a small package on the table. "I bought a dress for you. Tomorrow is the Harvest Festival. We're going to show up." I looked at the package without understanding. It had been so long since we had participated in community events. "Why?" His gaze hardened. "Because they're talking, commenting that nobody sees you anymore, that your mother never sends news. We have to show that everything is fine." The dress was light blue, pretty, but it made me uncomfortable. It was too tight, too adult for my 13 years. "I can't wear this, Grandpa. It's not appropriate for my age." He hit the table hard. "You'll wear what I tell you to. You think I spent money for nothing? You'll wear this and you'll smile at the festival, understand? You'll tell everyone that your mother is fine in Charleston, that you talk to her all the time." That night, lying in my bed, I felt something awakening inside me. It was no longer just sadness or fear. It was anger. A deep anger that was beginning to burn, to give me strength I didn't know I had. At the Harvest Festival, I wore the blue dress. I smiled when I needed to smile. I repeated the lie about my mother when asked. I saw the looks of the older men following me, and the way my grandfather seemed satisfied with that. "See? They're all looking at you," he whispered, his heavy hand on my back. "Soon I'll arrange a husband for you, someone who pays well and takes you away from here. You're already of age." It was at that moment that I decided, no matter how, I would find a way to do justice for my mother. And then I would run away to Riverdale to find Cousin Lucy, as my mother had planned. Night after night, I began to plan. I remembered the money and address my mother had hidden under the loose floorboard. One afternoon when my grandfather went out fishing, I checked if it was still there. The small cloth bag remained intact. Inside it, some dollar bills and a paper with the name Lucy Foster, Oak Street, near the town market, Riverdale, Oregon. I also remembered the tea my mother had taught me to make, To calm agitated people. I began to collect the necessary herbs, hiding them in a corner of the roof where I knew my grandfather would never look. At night, when he slept, I would silently go out to the yard and sit near the place where my mother was buried. "Give me strength, Mom," I whispered. "Show me the way." It was on one of those nights that I had the idea, a terrible and perfect idea at the same time. My grandfather had taken my mother from me. He had buried her as if she were nothing, without a funeral, without respect, without dignity. That's what I needed to correct. But for that, I would need a lot of courage, and I would need to wait for the right moment. The day that changed everything started like so many others. I woke up before dawn, lit the wood stove, prepared the oatmeal that my grandfather demanded every morning. The routine was always the same, but something inside me was different. During the night, I had dreamed of my mother. In the dream, she was dressed in white, standing in the yard, pointing to the place where she was buried. Her lips moved, but I couldn't hear her words. I woke up with tears on my face and a certainty in my heart. I couldn't stand much longer in that house. That morning, my grandfather was more irritable than usual. He complained about the oatmeal, said it was too watery. He threw the bowl on the floor and ordered me to clean up the mess. "Useless like your mother," he muttered as I picked up the ceramic shards. "Can't even make a proper oatmeal. Should have sent you away with her." I kept my head down, hands trembling. That's when it happened. My grandfather leaned over me and said something I will never forget. "You know what's funniest? That fool of your mother actually believed she was going to report me, that she was going to run away with you, as if she could escape from me." I froze. He had never so clearly admitted what he had done. I continued cleaning, afraid he would notice my reaction. "She begged, you know. Down there on the stairs with her head bleeding. 'Please, Dad, let me see my daughter one last time.' But I just watched until she stopped moving. Something inside me broke at that moment. The last childish hope I held, that maybe it had really been an accident, disappeared. He had killed her, deliberately. And now he was bragging about it. "Look at me when I'm talking to you," he shouted, grabbing my chin and forcing my face up. His eyes were bloodshot, the foul breath of whiskey even at that hour of the morning. "You're just like her, the same look. Sometimes I think about doing to you what I did to her." I don't know where the courage came from, but I replied, "Why don't you do it then?" He seemed surprised by my challenge, then laughed, a cold laugh that gave me chills. "Because you can still be useful. Old Claude from the general store has been asking about you, offered 2 acres of land in exchange for your hand. He's old, but he has property, and he needs a young woman to take care of him." "I'm 13, I whispered, horrified. "Old enough. At your age, your mother was already promised. Tomorrow we'll close the deal." He walked away, satisfied with himself. "Pack your things. You'll be living in his house after the 4th of July. When he left, I sat on the kitchen floor, among the shards of the bowl and the spilled oatmeal. It wasn't just my present that was being destroyed. It was my future. Forcibly married to an old man, 3 times my age, who looked at me with greedy eyes when we went to the store. A fate, perhaps, worse than death. That afternoon, while washing clothes in the creek, I made my decision. The plan I had been formulating for months would be executed that very night. I couldn't wait any longer. I returned home determined. I prepared dinner with special care, including in my grandfather's food the herbs my mother had taught me to use. "To calm agitated people," she said, but I knew that, in the right dose, it would do much more than that. It would leave him disoriented, confused, almost unable to react. During dinner, I watched as he ate, unaware of what I had done. In a short time, I noticed his eyes getting heavy, his speech more slurred. What did you put in this food?" he asked, his voice pasty. "Just a new seasoning, Grandpa. Don't you like it?" He tried to stand up, but his legs seemed not to obey. He staggered and had to lean on the table. What did you do?" "Nothing, Grandpa. You must be tired. Why don't you lie down a bit?" He looked at me suspiciously, but was too weak to argue. He dragged himself to his bed and fell into a heavy sleep almost immediately. I waited until I was sure he wouldn't wake up so soon. The night was silent, only the croaking of frogs and the occasional hoot of an owl could be heard. The full moon illuminated the yard when I went out with the shovel my grandfather kept in the shed. The place where my mother was buried was behind the house, near an old oak tree. I began to dig, tears streaming down my face as the earth was removed. I dug for almost an hour, my arms aching, my hands forming blisters that soon burst and bled. But I didn't stop. Finally, the shovel hit something softer than earth. Carefully, I removed a few more handfuls of soil until I found the mat in which my grandfather had wrapped my mother's body. The smell was terrible, and for a moment I thought I couldn't continue. But the image of my mother in the dream gave me strength. "I'm here, Mom," I whispered. "I've come to get you." With difficulty, I pulled the body wrapped in the mat out of the grave. It was lighter than I expected. Almost a year in the earth had taken a lot from her. With all the care I could, I carried my mother into the house. I cried silently, asking forgiveness for not having done this before, for not having been able to save her. I placed the body on the living room sofa, the same place where my mother used to sit to braid my hair or teach me about the plants. I arranged the mat as best I could, as if I were arranging sheets around her. "Now he'll have to face what he did, Mom. He won't hide you anymore as if you were nothing." I sat next to the body, holding what remained of my mother's hand, and waited. I waited as the hours passed slowly. I waited as the first rays of sun began to enter through the cracks in the window. I waited, knowing that my grandfather would soon wake up and would have to confront his crime. I heard a sound coming from the bedroom. He was waking up. I took a deep breath, strengthening myself for what would come next. I took the shovel and hid it beside the sofa where I could reach it quickly. My grandfather appeared at the living room door, still dazed by the effect of the herbs. He rubbed his eyes as if not believing what he was seeing. When he finally understood, his face contorted into an expression of pure horror. What did you do?" he shouted, his voice hoarse. "Are you crazy?" "No, Grandpa, I'm just doing what's right. Mom deserved more than a hole in the backyard." "You won't pretend she never existed anymore." He advanced toward me, stumbling. "You wretch! You're going to put her back right now." "She's my mother," I shouted back, all the pain and anger of the last months exploding inside me. "You killed her. You confessed this morning. And now you want to sell me to Claude as if I were merchandise." He hesitated for a moment, surprised by my boldness. Then his face contorted into a mask of fury. "I'm going to teach you to respect me once and for all." When he advanced, I grabbed the shovel. I didn't plan to use it. I just wanted to scare him, gain time to escape. But when he threw himself at me, I raised the shovel instinctively. The metal hit the side of his head with a horrible sound. My grandfather staggered backward, eyes wide with surprise. Blood began to trickle down his face. He tried to steady himself, but tripped on the edge of the stairs, the same stairs where my mother had fallen. It all happened very quickly. The sound of the body hitting the steps, the scream that was abruptly interrupted, then silence. I was paralyzed, the shovel still in my hands. When I finally managed to move, I went down the stairs trembling. My grandfather was lying at the base of the steps, in a strange position, his neck turned at an impossible angle. His open eyes looked at nothing. I went back up to the living room and collapsed on the floor next to the sofa where I had placed my mother. "It's over, Mom," I whispered between sobs. "He won't hurt anyone anymore." I spent the rest of that day in a state of shock, moving through the house like a ghost. I knew I needed to do something, but I couldn't think clearly. Night fell, and I was still sitting next to my mother, unable to sleep, unable to plan. It was only the next morning that reality began to sink in. I needed to get out of there. I needed to go to Riverdale, find Lucy. But first, I needed to ensure that no one discovered what had happened. With trembling hands, I took the small cloth bag from under the loose floorboard. The money wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. I put in a bundle some clothes, Lucy's address, and the few mementos I had of my mother: a wooden comb, an embroidered handkerchief, a small yellowed portrait. Then, with a heavy heart, I buried my mother again in the yard, this time with more care, more respect. I planted wildflowers over the spot. Rest in peace now, Mom. He paid for what he did. My grandfather's body I dragged to the hole he himself had dug almost a year before. I felt no pity, no remorse, just a huge emptiness inside me. That same afternoon, I locked the house and left without looking back. At the bus station, I bought a ticket on the first bus heading west. When someone asked why such a young girl was traveling alone, I replied with the story I had rehearsed. I'm going to meet my mother in Portland. She's sick and sent for me. The bus departed at dusk. Standing at the back, I saw Pineville fade away, the lights of the houses reflecting in the creek like fallen stars. I felt a mixture of relief and fear, relief to be leaving behind that place of pain, fear of what I would find ahead. But amid these confused feelings, there was also a certainty. My mother had been avenged, and now I had the chance to start over. The journey west was long and tiring. The bus stopped in various towns along the way, loading and unloading passengers and luggage. I kept quiet in a corner, avoiding looks and questions. To everyone, I was just a girl going to meet her mother in Portland. On the third day of travel, the bus stopped in Boise for a longer break. That's when I made my decision. Instead of continuing to Portland, where I knew no one, I decided to try to find my mother's cousin in Riverdale. Something told me it would be safer, that it was what my mother really wanted. I got off in Boise and waited 2 days for another bus that would go to Riverdale. I slept at the small terminal, hidden between luggage and benches. My money was little, and I guarded it like a treasure for the ticket and for the first days in the new city. On a morning with fog over the mountains, I finally arrived in Riverdale. The city was larger than Pineville, with more movement, more people. I felt small and lost among the unknown streets. With the crumpled paper in hand, I asked several people where Oak Street was, near the town market. After a few hours of searching, I found the street. It was a narrow lane, with simple houses on both sides. My heart was racing as I looked at each door, each window, looking for some sign of my mother's cousin. It was an elderly lady sweeping the front of her house who finally helped me. Lucy Foster, of course I know her. It's that blue house at the end of the street. I walked there, mentally rehearsing what I would say. How would I explain who I was, what had happened? With each step, I felt the weight of my story becoming heavier. The blue house had ferns hanging on the porch and a small garden in front. I knocked on the door, my heart almost jumping out of my mouth. A middle-aged woman answered, hair tied in a bun identical to the one my mother used to wear. The resemblance hit me like a punch, and for a moment, I was speechless. Yes? How can I help you? Are you Lucy Foster? She looked at me curiously. Yes, I am. I'm Irene, Delia's daughter. Her face transformed. First surprise, then a mixture of joy and confusion. Irene? Delia's daughter? My God! But what are you doing here alone? Where is your mother? That's when I broke down. The tears I had held back during the entire journey came all at once. Lucy pulled me inside, hugging me tight while I sobbed on her shoulder. Calm down, my child. Calm down. You're safe now. Gradually, between sobs, I told her a version of the truth. That my mother had died in an accident, that my grandfather had become violent, that I had run away because he wanted to force me to marry an old man. I didn't mention the unearthed body, nor the shovel, nor the fall down the stairs. Some truths were too heavy to share, even with someone as welcoming as Lucy. She listened to everything in silence, tears streaming down her face. My God, My girl, so much suffering for someone so young. She held my hands between hers, exactly as old Teresa used to do. Your mother and I were like sisters in childhood. We grew up together in Virginia before she married and went to West Virginia. We always wrote to each other. In the last letter I received, she mentioned she was worried about her father living in your house. She said that if something happened, I should take care of you. That surprised me. So my mother really had a plan to protect me even before things got worse. Will you send me back? Lucy caressed my face with affection. Of course not, child. You're going to stay here with me. This is your home now. That's how my new life in Riverdale began. Lucy was a widow and had lived alone since her only son, Jack, had moved to Seattle to work. She earned her living as a seamstress, making party dresses and alterations for the families in town. In the first few months, I lived in constant fear that someone from Pineville would appear, that they would discover what had happened, that they would take me back. I would wake up at night screaming, dreaming of the stairs, of my mother's body, of my grandfather's empty gaze. Lucy was always there, calming me, holding my hand until I fell back asleep. The past can't reach you here, she would tell me. You're protected, my child. Over time, she helped me create a new story for myself. For the neighbors and acquaintances, I was her niece, coming from the countryside after losing my parents in a fire. Nobody questioned. Such tragedies were common. We need to regularize your situation, Lucy told me one day, a few months after my arrival. You need documents. You need to go back to school. That's when I met Mr. Raymond, a clerk at the county office who was an old client of Lucy's. She told him a modified version of my story, that I had lost everything in a fire, including my documents. With his help, I got a new birth certificate. In it, I was Irene Foster, Lucy's grandniece. It was as if the frightened girl from Pineville had finally disappeared, giving way to a new person. At first, it was difficult to adapt to school in Riverdale. I was older than the other students in my grade, since I had lost almost 2 years of studies. But teacher Claudia, a patient lady with thick glasses, gave me special attention, helping me to make up for lost time. You have a sparkle in your eyes, girl, she told me one day. A sparkle of someone who will go far. It was strange to hear words of encouragement after so long being diminished by my grandfather. At first, I didn't believe them. But Lucy and teacher Claudia insisted so much that, little by little, I began to think that maybe they were right. At 15, I had already become one of the best students in the school. I discovered that I loved to study, especially literature and science. In my spare time, I helped Lucy with sewing, learning to do hems, sew buttons, adjust dresses. It was also at 15 that I met Arnold, a nephew of a client of Lucy's. He was 17 and worked at the fish market with his father. He was a quiet boy, of few words, but gentle eyes. We would meet in secret sometimes to talk in the square or walk by the riverside. Lucy noticed right away. This boy is a good lad, she told me. But go slowly, Irene. You still have a lot ahead of you. And she was right. My priority was to study, to build a life different from the one I had left behind in Pineville. Arnold understood this and respected it. Our courtship was innocent, made of conversations, shared dreams, and occasionally a shy kiss when no one was looking. Life followed a peaceful and safe rhythm, so different from the constant tension I had lived before. But deep in my heart, the weight of what had happened was still there. Sometimes, when I was alone, guilt consumed me. Not for my grandfather's death. As much as I tried, I couldn't feel remorse for that. But for having left my mother buried in that yard, far from me. When I turned 18, I made a decision. I told Lucy the whole truth, everything. About how my grandfather had killed my mother, about how I had confronted him, about the shovel, the fall down the stairs, the escape. She listened to everything in silence, holding my hands tightly. You had no choice, child, she said when I finished. You did what you had to do to survive. Your mother would understand. But I left her there, buried in that yard. Your mother is not in that yard, Lucy said firmly. Her body may be there, but she is here, she pointed to my heart. And here, she pointed to my head. In your gestures, in your smile that's just like hers, in your strength, Delia lives in you. Those words were like a balm to my wounded soul. That night, for the first time in many years, I had no nightmares. At 20, I married Arnold. It was a simple ceremony at the Riverdale Church, with Lucy walking me down the aisle. We began our life together in a small wooden house that he built himself near the market. He continued to work with his father in the fish business, and I gave private lessons to children with difficulties in school, using what I had learned with teacher Claudia. A year later, our first child, August, was born. When I placed him in my arms for the first time, I felt that a cycle was completing. Here was a new life, a new beginning, free from the shadows of the past. Lucy was fundamental in this phase. Already elderly, but still full of energy, she came every day to help me with the baby, teach recipes, tell stories about my mother that I didn't know. Did you know that your mother, when she was your age, wanted to be a nurse? She told me one day. She had a talent with medicinal herbs since she was little. If life had been different, perhaps she would have realized that dream. These stories connected me with my mother in a way I didn't imagine was possible. It was as if, through Lucy's words, I could know the woman my mother was before everything. Before my father, before my grandfather, before the tragedy. Gradually, life gained a sweetness that I never thought I would experience. We had 2 more children, Louise and Sebastian. Arnold prospered in the fish business, eventually opening his own stall in the market. I bought a sewing machine and began to make clothes for children using the techniques Lucy had taught me. When Lucy passed away, at 86, I felt as if I had lost my mother a second time. But unlike the first loss, this was surrounded by love, by farewells, by gratitude. At the wake, an elderly lady approached me. "You must be Irene," she said. "Lucy talked a lot about you. She said you were the daughter she never had." "And she was the mother that destiny gave me when I lost mine," I replied, tears streaming. Life continued. My children grew up, married, had their own children. Arnold and I grew old together, seeing our family increase and prosper. I never returned to Pineville, nor tried to find out what happened to the house where I grew up. Some doors are better kept closed. But sometimes, when I'm alone watching the river flow, I think of the girl I was, the path I traveled. I think of my mother, Delia, and hope that, wherever she is, she can see the woman I became. A woman who survived, who rebuilt her life piece by piece, who found love and peace after so much pain. And if there's one thing I've learned in this long journey, it's that revenge doesn't bring peace. What brings peace is forgiveness, not of others, but of oneself. Forgiving oneself for not having been able to change the past, for having done what was necessary to survive, and above all, allowing oneself to be happy, even while carrying scars. Riverdale became my home, my safe harbor. It was here that I found a new family, that I put down roots, that I planted my future. And it's here that I intend to stay, watching my grandchildren grow, telling stories of the past, not the painful ones, but those worth remembering. Today, at 73, I live a peaceful life here in Riverdale, my town by adoption and heart. My wooden house on the street that goes down to the Columbia River has a wide porch where I spend most of my days, knitting colorful quilts and observing the movement of the waters. Arnold left 5 years ago, a heart attack while he slept, without suffering. 50 years together, an entire life shared. I miss him every day, especially at dusk, when he used to sit beside me to watch the sunset tint the river red and gold. But I don't allow myself to sink into sadness. As my mother used to say, through Lucy's stories, life is like the river. It always flows forward, even after the rapids. My 3 children are my pride and joy. August became a teacher, teaches mathematics at the state college. Louise followed in my footsteps and works with sewing, has a small studio in the center of town where she makes wedding dresses. Sebastian, the youngest, was the only one who left Riverdale. He lives in Portland, where he works as a nurse. He was the one who realized the dream that my mother couldn't. And my little grandkids. Ah, they are the light of my days. I have 6 grandchildren, but 3 of them live nearby. Marina and Caleb, August's children, and Emma, Louise's daughter. They come to visit me almost every day after school. They sit here on the porch with me, help me sort the colorful threads for the quilts, ask for stories from the old times. I tell them stories about the forest, about the spirits of the river, about the 4th of July celebrations of yesteryear. I teach recipes for apple pie and blackberry cobbler. I show how to identify the herbs that cure stomachache, fever, insomnia, knowledge I inherited from my mother and that I keep alive through them. But there are stories I don't tell. The painful past was left behind, buried as it should be. My children know softened versions of the truth. That I lost my mother very early, that I came to Riverdale fleeing from a violent grandfather. They don't know the darkest details, and there's no reason for them to know. Some scars are just ours, to carry in silence. My routine is simple and brings me contentment. I wake up with the birds around 5 in the morning. I prepare my coffee, strong and sweet, as I learned from Lucy. I take care of my plants. I have a small garden in the back of the house where I grow medicinal herbs and flowers. Sometimes, when my joints don't hurt too much, I go to the market to buy fresh fish and chat with the vendors, many of them children and grandchildren of the friends I made throughout my life in Riverdale. The afternoons are for quilting. I learned this art from Mrs. Nancy, a lady who lived in the house next door when I moved here with Arnold. At first, it was just a pastime, something to occupy my hands while the children grew up. Over time, it became my passion and a small source of income. My quilts are known in town for their quality and vibrant colors. I sell some at the Sunday craft fair, others I give as gifts to those in need. Quilting has something meditative, healing about it. Each stitch I make in the quilt is like tying a memory, a feeling, a piece of my story. The colors I choose speak of my state of mind. Blues and greens when I'm at peace, reds and oranges when I feel nostalgic, purples and yellows when nostalgia visits me. On Sundays, I go to Mass at the main church. I'm not the most religious, but I like the ritual, the community, the feeling of belonging. After Mass, my children and grandchildren come to have lunch here at home. I prepare baked fish with herbs, cornbread, cucumber salad, simple foods that make the table happy. Seeing everyone gathered, talking, laughing, discussing politics or football, I feel an immense gratitude for the life I built. Sometimes, when I'm alone, I take the old wooden comb that was my mother's, one of the few things I brought from Pineville. I look at it and feel that somehow she would be proud. Proud to see that I survived, that I didn't let hatred and pain define who I am, that I managed to create a family based on love and respect, so different from the one in which I grew up. I won't say I don't have difficult moments. There are nights when the nightmares still return. Nights when I wake up frightened, hearing the sound of a body falling down the stairs. In these moments, I get up, make a chamomile tea with lemon balm, not that tea I gave my grandfather that fateful night, but one that truly calms without ulterior motives, and go to the porch. I look at the river, at the stars, and breathe deeply until the anguish passes. With age, I've learned that carrying guilt serves no purpose. I did what I needed to do to survive, to have the chance of a better life. If that makes me a bad person in the eyes of some, so be it. I only know that that frightened 13-year-old girl didn't have many options. And looking back, at the path I traveled, I don't regret the choices I made. I have simple plans for the future. I want to see my grandchildren grow up, graduate, build their own lives. I want to continue knitting my quilts as long as my hands allow. I want to sit on my porch every afternoon and watch the river flow, carrying stories of other lives, of other journeys. And when my time comes to depart, I want to go in peace, knowing that I left more love than pain in this world. That I transformed a story that began with tragedy into a saga of overcoming and renewal. That I honored my mother's memory not through revenge, but through the dignified and loving life I built. Riverdale welcomed me when I needed it most. It gave me a new beginning, a new chance, and I reciprocated with deep roots, with a family that spreads throughout the town like the branches of a large tree. This is my home, my place of peace. Here, in this town by the Columbia River, the frightened girl from Pineville finally found her safe harbor. My dear ones who have come this far with me, listening to this story of pain and overcoming, I want to leave with you some words that I carry in my heart. If you are going through dark moments, through situations that seem to have no way out, know that there is always a tomorrow. There is always a boat that can take you away from the storms. I learned that age doesn't define our strength, but rather our capacity to start anew each day. When I fled Pineville at 13, I was just a frightened girl, with nothing but a few coins and a lot of fear. But inside me there was a determination greater than terror, a will to live that overcame all pains. My wrinkles are maps of survival. Each one tells a story of pain overcome. I look at my hands today, wrinkled and calloused by time, and I see in them the story of an entire life. Hands that knew violence, but that chose to create, nurture, caress. Hands that learned that building is always more powerful than destroying. Life taught me that even in the deepest darkness, our inner light never goes out. In the darkest moments, when it seemed there was no hope, something inside me refused to give up. This light, we all have it. Sometimes it seems weak, almost invisible, but it's always there, waiting for us to feed it. I never allowed my dignity to be stolen, even when they tried to take everything from me. My grandfather could control my body, my movements, but my thoughts, my dreams, my essence, these were mine alone. No one can take your dignity if you don't allow it. Remember that. I discovered that we are stronger than we imagine, especially when we think we can't take it anymore. There is within each of us a reserve of strength that we only discover in the most difficult moments. A resistance that surprises us, that makes us move forward when everything seems lost. Time doesn't heal all wounds, but it teaches us to live with them and still smile. I carry the scars of my story, but they don't define me. I learned to live not despite them, but with them. They are part of who I am, witnesses to the journey I traveled. My story is not about what they did to me, but about how I chose to respond. I could have become bitter, vengeful, closed to love. But I chose another path. I chose to build a life based on affection, generosity, gratitude for what I have, not anger for what I lost. I learned that true strength is not in never falling, but in getting up every time. Life will knock us down, that's certain. The important thing is how we react to the falls. If we stay on the ground, lamenting, or if we rise, shake off the dust, and move forward. If you know someone who is experiencing situations of abuse or violence, extend your hand. Sometimes, all a person in this situation needs is to know that they are not alone, that there is someone willing to help, to listen without judging. A gesture of solidarity can be the difference between despair and hope. Seek help from authorities and protection organizations in your city or country. Anywhere in the world, there are people committed to protecting the most vulnerable. Don't be afraid to ask for help. This is not weakness, it's an act of courage. Observe the signs. People living in abusive situations often isolate themselves, change behavior, have unexplained marks on their body, live in a constant state of alert. If you notice these signs in someone close, don't remain silent. Your interest can save a life. Remember that in any culture, in any country, respect for human dignity is a universal value. No one has the right to hurt, humiliate, or subjugate another person. We all deserve to live without fear, without violence, without oppression. And if you are the one suffering, know that your story doesn't end in the painful chapters. There is always the possibility of a new beginning, of a different life. I am living proof of this. From the terrified girl from Pineville to the serene lady of Riverdale, transformation is possible, healing is possible, peace is possible. My dear sons and daughters who are watching me from so many different corners, I ask from the bottom of my heart, subscribe to the Grandparents' Tales channel now and activate the notification bell. Each subscription is like an extended hand to other people who have gone through traumas like I went through. When you subscribe, you are saying, this story matters. This pain will not be forgotten. This overcoming deserves to be celebrated. Share this video immediately with all the people you know. Share because there are thousands of Irenes out there, trapped in nightmare houses, not knowing that there is a way out, a chance to start over. Your sharing can be the boat that takes someone away from the storm, just as Lucy was my savior boat. And leave in the comments the word rebirth for me to know who watched until the end, who heard my complete story. This word represents everything I lived, the chance to be born again, to create a new story, to transform tears into strength. Do this now. Don't wait even another minute. Your action can be the turning point in the life of someone who is suffering in silence. From a 73-year-old lady who knew hell and built her own heaven, I leave my tight hug and my gratitude for having listened to me. May God bless each one of you, and may hope never be lacking in your hearts.